Jake Morrison sat at his desk and stared at the small blue screen in front of him. The message was short and simple, but it changed everything. After 30 years of working with aliens from across the galaxy, humanity was going home. The message came directly from Earth's government. No big speeches, no angry words. Just a quiet order that all humans working for the Galactic Council should pack their things and leave within the next month. Jake read it 3 times to make sure he understood it correctly. He looked out the window of his office. The giant space station called Nexus Prime floated in the darkness, surrounded by ships from dozens of different alien worlds. For 20 years, Jake had called this place home. He had learned to speak 12 alien languages. He had helped solve trade disputes between worlds that were light years apart. He had made friends with beings that looked nothing like humans. Now, he had to leave it all behind. Jake picked up his personal communicator and called Captain Lisa Grant. She commanded the human transport ships that would take everyone home. Her face appeared on the screen, looking tired but calm. "I got the message." "2," Lisa said before Jake could speak. "My ships are already on their way to pick up our people from all the council worlds. We should have everyone out in 3 weeks. Do we know why?" Jake asked. The message didn't explain anything. Lisa shook her head. "Nobody's talking. But something must have happened back on Earth. Something big enough to make them pull everyone out of council space." Jake understood. For 40 years, humans had been part of the Galactic Council. They had worked on hundreds of worlds, helped build space stations, shared their technology, and made trade agreements. Humans were not the strongest species in the galaxy. They were not the smartest or the most advanced. But they worked hard and got along with almost everyone. Now they were leaving, and nobody seemed to know why. 2 hours later, Jake walked through the main halls of Nexus Prime. Alien beings moved past him, going about their daily business. The tall, gray-skinned Corvan soldiers marched in perfect lines. The blue-scaled Nereid diplomats swam through tubes filled with water that ran along the ceiling. The crystal-like Vorth beings floated in their special chambers, glowing with soft light. None of them looked worried. None of them seemed to care that humanity was leaving. Jake stopped at a small cafe where he often ate lunch. The owner was a friendly Shithari named Clickbuzz. The insect-like alien had 6 arms and could make 5 different meals at the same time. "Jake Morrison," Clickbuzz called out in his buzzing voice. "Your usual sandwich?" "Not today," Jake said. "I'm leaving tomorrow. Going back to human space." Clickbuzz stopped working and looked at Jake with his large, compound eyes. "Leaving? But why? Did someone make you angry?" "No, nothing like that. All humans are leaving the council. Orders from Earth." The alien was quiet for a moment, then went back to making food. "Well, that's too bad." "You humans always tip well," Jake almost smiled. Even when he was leaving forever, Clickbuzz was thinking about money. That was very Shithari of him. As Jake walked back to his office, he passed the main council chamber. Through the open doors, he could see the daily meeting in progress. Supreme Chancellor Thexkar, a big Corvan with red skin and sharp teeth, was speaking to the gathered delegates. "The human departure is no concern of ours," Thexkar was saying. "They were always a minor species, weak and soft. The council will be stronger without them." Several other aliens nodded in agreement. The Zilani delegate, a tall being with purple skin, spoke up. "Humans were useful for simple tasks, but they never contributed anything important. We can easily replace them." Jake felt his face get hot. 30 years of work, and this is what they thought of humanity? Simple tasks? Nothing important? He thought about all the human engineers who kept the space stations running. The human doctors who had found cures for alien diseases. The human teachers who had helped alien children learn. The human farmers who had turned dead worlds into green planets full of life. Simple tasks. Jake went back to his office and started packing. His personal things fit into 2 small boxes. 30 years of life, and it all fit into 2 boxes. While he packed, he watched the news reports from across council space. Human colonies were shutting down. Human research stations were closing. Human trading posts were empty. On every world, humans were quietly packing up and leaving. There were no protests. No angry speeches, no demands for better treatment. Humans just left. The alien news reporters seemed confused. Other species usually made a big fuss when they left the council. They would give angry speeches about being treated badly. They would threaten war or promise revenge. But humans just packed their things and went home. "It's very strange," said one Nereid reporter. "The humans are leaving, but they're not saying why. They're not angry. They're not making threats. They're just doing." That night, Jake had dinner with 3 other humans who worked on the station. They were all leaving the next day. Nobody talked much. They ate their food and looked around at the alien restaurant where they had shared so many meals over the years. "Think we'll ever come back?" asked Dr. Amy Rodriguez. She had worked in the station's medical center for 15 years. "Maybe," said engineer Danny Blake, "but probably not the same way. Something's changed." "What do you think happened on Earth?" asked Carol Jenkins, who worked in the trade department. Jake shrugged. "Maybe they got tired of being called a minor species. Maybe they decided we were wasting our time here. Or maybe," Danny said quietly, "they know something we don't." The next morning, Jake stood in the transport ship and looked back at Nexus Prime for the last time. The huge station looked the same as always. Ships came and went. Aliens worked and lived and argued just like they had for decades, but something felt different. Something felt empty. As the transport ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying Jake and 50 other humans away from the only home they had known for years. Jake wondered if the aliens would miss them. He doubted it. They would find out soon enough. 3 months had passed since the last human transport ship left Council space. Danny Blake was supposed to be gone too, but his engineering team had asked to stay a few extra weeks. The massive fusion reactors that powered Nexus Prime needed special maintenance, and the alien engineers wanted to learn how to do it properly. Danny stood in the reactor room, watching a group of Corvin technicians try to adjust the power flow settings. The lead technician, Gorthven, had confident red skin and sharp claws, but his hands shook as he worked with the human-built control panel. "No, that's not right," Danny said gently. "If you push the flow rate too high, the containment field will start to wobble. See that yellow light? That means danger?" Gorthven stepped back quickly. "But the manual says to increase power when demand goes up." "The manual gives you the basics," Danny explained. "But these reactors are like living things. You have to feel how they're running, listen to the sounds they make. Watch for the small signs that tell you something's wrong." The Corvan looked confused. "Feel? Listen? We have sensors for that." "We have computers." Danny nodded. "Yes, but sensors can break. Computers can make mistakes. A good engineer learns to use his eyes and ears too." For 2 weeks, Danny tried to teach the alien engineers everything they needed to know, but he could see they didn't really understand. They wanted simple rules to follow. They wanted computer programs that would do all the thinking for them. They didn't want to learn the art of engineering. On his last day, Danny left detailed notes and video instructions. He also left his personal communicator number just in case they needed help later, but he doubted they would call. The Corvan were too proud to ask humans for help, far across the galaxy. On the trading world of Kepler Junction, Captain Vexthorol was having his own problems. The Zilani merchant had been running cargo ships between council worlds for 20 years. His business had always been good because the trade routes were reliable and efficient. But now, 3 months after the humans left, everything was falling apart. Vexthorol stood in his office, looking at shipping reports on his computer screen. Every number was red, which meant bad news. His cargo ships were taking twice as long to deliver goods. Some routes that used to take 3 days now took 2 weeks. Other routes had stopped working completely. "I don't understand it," his assistant, Karanesh, said as she looked at the reports. The jump gates are still working. The space lanes are clear. Why are our ships so slow?" Vexthorol scratched his purple chin. "I've been thinking about that. Remember those human freight companies that used to run cargo between the outer worlds?" "Yes, small ships, nothing special." Maybe they were more special than we thought. Look at this route map. Vexthorl pointed at his screen. Before the humans left, cargo from Zolani Prime to the Nereid worlds took 3 days. Now it takes 12 days. That doesn't make sense. It does if the humans were using some kind of special navigation. Maybe they knew shortcuts that we don't know. Maybe they had better jump calculations. Karanesh looked worried. Are you saying we need the humans back? Vexthorl didn't answer. He couldn't admit that humans might be better at something than his own people. On the research world of Academia Prime, Dr. Amy Rodriguez was packing the last of her equipment. She had spent 15 years studying alien diseases and working on new medicines. Now she was going home, and her alien colleagues seemed sad to see her go. Dr. Flux Pattern, a Vorth scientist made of living crystal, floated near Amy's desk. "We will miss your insights," the crystal being said in its musical voice. "Your research methods were very unusual." Amy looked up from her packing. "Unusual how?" "You always ask different questions. When we studied a disease, we looked for ways to fight it. You looked for ways to understand it. You wanted to know why it existed. Understanding leads to better solutions," Amy said. "If you know why something happens, you can prevent it from happening again." Dr. Flux Pattern's crystal body dimmed. "Slightly, yes, we are beginning to see that. Since you announced your departure, our research has slowed down. We find ourselves stuck on problems that seemed easy when you were here." Amy felt a little sad. She had enjoyed working with the alien scientists. They were brilliant in their own ways, but they all thought differently than humans. They were very good at solving problems, but humans were better at seeing the big picture. "What about the terraforming project on Kepler-7?" Amy asked. "Are you still planning to make that planet livable?" We are having difficulties. The soil chemistry is not responding as our models predicted. The plant growth is much slower than expected," Amy frowned. She had worked on that project for 3 years. The secret was not just adding the right chemicals to the soil. You had to understand how all the different parts of an ecosystem worked together. Plants, bacteria, minerals, weather, everything affected everything else. "Did you check the bacterial balance in the soil samples from Sector 7? Amy asked. Dr. Flux Pattern's light flickered. "Bacterial balance?" "Our computers said the bacteria levels were adequate." "Adequate isn't enough. You need the right kinds of bacteria in the right amounts, and they change depending on the season and the mineral content of the soil." Amy pulled out her tablet and showed Dr. Flux Pattern her notes. "See? The bacteria in Sector 7 are completely different from Sector 3. That's why the plants aren't growing." The crystal scientist studied Amy's notes for a long moment. "This is very complex. How did you learn to see these patterns?" Amy shrugged. "Experience, I guess. And my grandmother was a farmer back on Earth. She taught me that everything in nature is connected." Dr. Flux Pattern was quiet. Finally, the alien scientist asked, "Will humans ever come back to help us?" Amy picked up her last box and headed toward the door. "I don't know. That's not up to me." As Amy's transport ship lifted off from Academia Prime, she looked down at the research complex where she had spent so many years. She wondered if the alien scientists would figure out the terraforming project without human help. She doubted it. Back on Nexus Prime, the first real problem happened. Exactly 1 week after Danny Blake left. The main reactor in Section 12 started making a strange humming sound. The Corvin engineers checked all their sensors and ran computer diagnostics, but everything looked normal. Gorthven stared at the control panel, remembering Danny's words about listening to the reactor. The humming was getting louder, but all the readings were green, which meant everything was fine, or did it? 2 hours later, the containment field failed and Section 12 lost power for 6 hours. Nobody was hurt, but thousands of aliens were stuck in elevators and transportation tubes. The emergency backup systems worked, but just barely. When the power came back on, Gorthven found Danny's contact number and thought about calling him, but he didn't. The Corvan were too proud to ask humans for help. General Korthzek was not a patient Corvan. His red skin was darker than most of his people, and his teeth were sharper. He had fought in 3 wars and won them all. But the problems he faced now were different from any enemy he had ever fought. Korthzek stood in the main security center on Nexus Prime, looking at reports from across Council space. In the past 2 months, there had been 47 major system failures on different worlds. Power grids were failing. Communication networks were breaking down. Transportation systems were stopping without warning. What connects all these failures? Korthzek asked his aide, a young Corvin named Brektor. We're not sure, sir. Each failure seems different. Power problems on Zalani Prime, communication breakdowns on G37, life support failures on the mining stations near Vorth Space. Korthzek studied the reports more carefully. Wait, look at the dates when these systems were first installed. And look at who helped design them. Brektor's eyes grew wide as he checked the records. SIR humans were involved in almost every one of these projects. Sometimes as main engineers, sometimes as consultants. How involved? Very involved, sir. In many cases, it looks like humans designed the basic systems and then taught other species how to operate them. Korthzek felt a cold feeling in his stomach. Are you saying that humans built most of our important technology? Not built, sir, but they seem to have been involved in making it work properly. On the other side of the galaxy, Tony Parker was finishing his last day of work for Quantum Dynamics, a private engineering company that had contracts with several council worlds. Tony was one of the few humans who had stayed behind to finish important projects, but now his contract was over and he was going home to Earth. Tony stood in the control room of the asteroid mining station called Deep Rock 7. The station used giant machines to break apart asteroids and extract valuable metals. It was dangerous work, and the machines needed constant maintenance. So this is how you restart the primary excavator, Tony explained to Vorth Tech 9, a crystal being who would take over Tony's job. But you have to be very careful about the pressure settings. If you push too hard, the cutting beam can overload. Vorth Tech 9's crystal body glowed blue, which meant confusion. The manual says to use maximum pressure for fastest cutting. The manual is wrong, Tony said. I wrote a report about that 3 years ago, but nobody read it. Maximum pressure works fine for small asteroids, but when you're cutting big ones, the heat builds up too fast. You have to pulse the beam. Cut for 30 seconds, rest for 10 seconds, then cut again. That seems inefficient, Tony shrugged. It's slower, but it's safer, and it makes the cutting equipment last longer. Trust me, I've been doing this for 12 years. Vorth Tech 9 was quiet for a moment. Will you leave written instructions? I already did. 3 copies stored in the main computer and in the backup systems. Tony picked up his tool bag. Good luck. You'll need it. As Tony's transport ship carried him away from Deep Rock 7, he wondered how long it would take for something to go wrong. The Vorth were good with technology, but they liked to follow rules exactly. They didn't understand that sometimes rules needed to be broken. On the farming world of Verdant, things were already going wrong. Beth Collins had left 6 months ago, but the problems with the crops were getting worse every week. Farm supervisor Nereid Blue Current floated in his water tank and looked at the latest reports. The grain crops that should have been ready for harvest were small and weak. The vegetable gardens that used to produce food for 12 worlds were barely growing. At all, I don't understand, Blue Current said to his assistant, Landwalker 5, a Chithari who worked on the dry parts of the farm. We followed all of Beth Collins's written instructions exactly. We planted the right seeds at the right time. We used the right fertilizers. Why are the crops failing? Landwalker 5 clicked his mandibles nervously. Maybe we missed something. Beth's instructions were very detailed, but she used to make small changes all the time. She would walk through the fields every day and adjust things. Adjust what things? Everything. How much water for different sections? Which fertilizer to use depending on the weather? When to plant and when to wait. She said farming was not just about following rules. She said you had to watch and listen to the land. Blue Current felt frustrated, but that doesn't make sense. Farming is science. You follow the procedures and get the results. That's what we thought too. but look at Sector 12. Landwalker 5 pointed at his tablet. Beth always planted the corn there 2 weeks later than the manual said. We planted on schedule this year, and all the corn died when the early frost came. How did she know there would be frost? She said she could smell it in the air. She said the wind felt different. Landwalker 5 paused. I thought she was being silly. But she was always right. Blue Current was silent for a long time. Finally, he asked, "Do we have any way to contact her?" She left her communication code, but she said to only use it for real emergencies. Blue Current looked at the reports again. Verdant fed 12 worlds. If the crops failed completely, millions of beings would go hungry. This is a real emergency, he said. Back on Nexus Prime, the communication problems were getting worse. The quantum entanglement arrays that allowed instant communication across the galaxy were producing more and more errors. Messages were being scrambled. Important calls were being lost. Some worlds had lost contact completely. Chief Communications Officer Korthsil, a Zelani with pale purple skin, stood in the main communication center and watched her technicians struggle with equipment they didn't really understand. Try rerouting through the backup array, Korthsil ordered. We already tried that, replied her lead technician. The backup is showing the same errors. What about the emergency protocols? Those were written by humans. We're not sure how to implement them. Korthsil felt a headache coming on. What do you mean, written by humans? This is our communication system. Yes, but the emergency procedures were developed by human engineers. 5 years ago, they're very complex. Something about quantum resonance frequencies and temporal synchronization buffers. Do we have the human who wrote them? Dr. Mark Johnson. But he left for Earth 2 months ago. Korthsil stared at the control panels covered with warning lights. So we have a communication system that we can't fix, emergency procedures that we don't understand, and the only people who knew how it all worked are gone. That's correct, ma'am. For the first time in her career, Korthsil didn't know what to do across council space. The same scene was playing out on dozens of worlds. Critical systems were failing, and the beings who understood how to fix them were gone. The aliens had taken human expertise for granted for so long that they never learned to do things for themselves. Now they were paying the price on Earth. In a quiet office in Geneva, Director Sarah Williams read the daily reports from the monitoring stations that still watched council space. The aliens didn't know it, but humans had left behind a network of hidden sensors that tracked the major systems across the galaxy. Sarah shook her head as she read about power failures, communication breakdowns, and transportation problems. She had warned the Council 5 years ago that they were too dependent on human expertise. She had suggested training programs and technology transfer initiatives. They had thanked her politely and ignored her completely. Now the bills were coming due, and humanity was far away, watching from a distance as the galactic civilization they had helped build began to crumble. Sarah wondered how long it would take for the aliens to realize they needed help. She wondered if they were proud enough to never ask. Supreme Chancellor Thexkar had never called an emergency meeting before. In his 15 years of leading the Galactic Council, there had been wars, trade disputes, and natural disasters, but nothing that required gathering all the major species leaders at once. Now he sat at the head of the Great Council Chamber, looking at the worried faces of beings from across the galaxy. The room that usually buzzed with confident conversation was strangely quiet. Report? Thexkar said to General Korth-CK. The security chief stood up, his red skin darker than usual. The situation is worse than we thought, Chancellor. In the past month, we've had critical system failures on 37 worlds. The Nereid homeworld of Aquatica has lost most of its water purification systems. The Vorth crystal cities on Lumina are experiencing massive power failures. The Chithari hive worlds can barely communicate with each other. What's causing these failures? That's the problem, sir. We can't find a single cause. Each failure seems different, but they all have one thing in common. Thexkar waited. Humans were involved in designing or maintaining every single system that's failed. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Delegate Vorth Prime Crystal, a being of pure light, flashed bright red with anger. Are you suggesting humans sabotaged our systems before they left? No, sir, Korthzek replied. There's no evidence of sabotage. It appears that humans were simply better at maintaining these systems than we realized. Ambassador Deep Current Flowing. The Nereid representative spoke from her water-filled speaking tube. Explain the water crisis on Aquatica. Korthzek pulled up a holographic display. The water purification plants were built 30 years ago using standard council technology. But 15 years ago, human engineers made modifications to improve efficiency. They installed something called biological filtration systems. What's the problem? The biological systems require constant adjustment. The humans who maintained them understood how to keep the living filters healthy. Without that knowledge, the filters are dying and the water is becoming toxic. Deep Current Flowing's blue skin turned pale. How many people are affected? 2 billion Nereid across 12 worlds. The chamber fell silent. Vorth Prime Crystal flickered nervously. What about our energy distribution networks? Same problem, different cause. Humans redesigned your power grids to be more efficient, but the new systems require constant fine-tuning. Your technicians followed the maintenance schedules exactly, but they didn't understand the underlying principles. How many Vorth cities are affected? All of them. Another long silence filled the chamber. Tretheri Delegate Hivemind 7 spoke, in the buzzing voice of his species. Our communication problems? Human linguists created the translation matrices that allow your hive worlds to coordinate with each other. Without regular updates and adjustments, the translations are becoming more and more inaccurate. Some hive worlds are completely cut off from the network. Vexkar felt a cold weight in his stomach. Are you telling me that humans were essential to all our major systems? Not essential to build them, sir, but essential to keep them running properly. Admiral Korthzek, an old Corvin with battle scars across his face, stood up slowly. There's something else, Chancellor. Something worse. What? The border sensors on the Galactic rim have been malfunctioning for 2 weeks. Yesterday, one of our patrol ships detected energy signatures that matched Devour scout vessels. The chamber erupted again, but this time with fear instead of anger. The Devourers were an ancient enemy from outside the galaxy. They had tried to invade Council space 50 years ago and had been defeated, but barely. How many ships? Vexkar asked. We don't know. The sensors that should detect them aren't working properly, and the defensive systems that were supposed to keep them out. Korthzek paused. Those systems were designed by human military analysts. Delegate Zelani Trade Prime, a tall purple being, spoke for the first time. This is impossible. Humans were never our military leaders. They never commanded our fleets. Admiral Korthzek pulled up another display. That's true, but look at this. The display showed a complex web of defensive positions throughout Council space. This is our current military deployment. And this is what we had 50 years ago when we fought the Devourers. The difference was obvious. The current deployment was far more sophisticated, with overlapping fields of fire and strategic choke points that could stop an invasion fleet. Who designed the current deployment? Vexkar asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer. Colonel Steve Carter? Human military liaison. He convinced us to move our fleets to these positions over the past 20 years. He said it was more efficient. Where is Colonel Carter now? He returned to Earth 4 months ago. Vorth Prime Crystal's light dimmed to almost nothing. Are you saying that without humans, we cannot defend ourselves against the Devourers? Saying that our defenses were built around human strategic thinking. Without that thinking, we're vulnerable. The chamber was dead quiet for a long moment. Finally, Zelani Trade Prime spoke again. How bad is our economic situation? Vexkar looked at the economic advisor, a Nereid named Tide Calculator. Tell them. Tide Calculator's water tank bubbled nervously. Trade volume has dropped by 60% since the humans left. Major shipping routes that used to take days now take weeks. Some routes have stopped working entirely. Why? Human freight companies didn't just carry cargo. They optimized the entire trade network. They found the most efficient routes, negotiated the best deals, and connected markets that would never have found each other otherwise. Can't we do the same thing? We're trying, but it's incredibly complex. Humans seem to understand the big picture in a way that we don't. They could see connections between distant markets and predict trade patterns months in advance. Chithuri Delegate HiveMind 7 buzzed angrily. This is impossible. Humans were a minor species, weak and primitive. Admiral Korthek looked at the insect being with tired eyes. I used to think that too, but I've been studying the military records. Do you know what human casualty rates were in our wars? Lower than ours because they avoided the real fighting. Lower than ours because they were better at planning. Human commanders had the lowest casualty rates and the highest success rates of any species in Council military history. HiveMind 7's antennae twitched. That cannot be correct. Check the records yourself. Vexkar stood up, his massive frame casting a shadow over the chamber. The question now is, what do we do about it? We have critical infrastructure failing, an economic collapse, and a potential invasion by our worst enemies. We contact the humans, Deep Current Flowing said immediately. Absolutely not, Vorth Prime Crystal flashed bright red. We are not begging for help from an inferior species. Inferior? Deep Current Flowing's voice was sharp. They're not here, and everything is falling apart. How does that make them inferior? They left without warning. They abandoned their responsibilities. Maybe they left because we treated them like servants instead of partners. The argument that followed lasted for 3 hours. Half the delegates wanted to contact Earth immediately and ask for help. The other half refused to admit that humans were necessary. In the end, they agreed to try to solve the problems themselves first. They would send emergency repair teams to the failing systems. They would reorganize their military defenses. They would rebuild their trade networks, but privately, many of the delegates were already thinking about what they would say if they had to call Earth on the mining station Deep Rock 7. The problem started exactly 2 weeks after Tony Parker left. Vorth Tech 9 was cutting a large asteroid when the excavator began to overheat. He followed the manual and increased the cutting beam to maximum power. The beam overloaded immediately, sending feedback through the entire system. The explosion destroyed 3 mining drones and damaged the main cutting array so badly that the station had to shut down completely. Vor Thash Tech-9 stared at the wreckage and remembered Tony's warning about pulsing the beam for large asteroids. The human had been right. The manual was wrong, but it was too late now. On Verdant, the crop failures were getting worse. Farm Supervisor Blue Current had finally contacted Beth Collins on Earth, but her response was not encouraging. I can't fix your problems from here, Beth had said during their video call. Farming isn't just about following instructions. You have to understand the land, the weather, the seasons. It takes years to learn. Can you come back? Blue Current had asked. That's not my decision to make. Now, with the harvest season approaching, Blue Current was looking at crop yields that were less than half of what they should be. 12 worlds depended on food from Verdant. If the harvest failed completely, billions would go hungry for the first time since humans left. Some of the council species were beginning to understand what they had lost, but their pride kept them from admitting it, even as their civilization crumbled around them. The Devourers were coming, and the council was not ready. The first Devourer attack came without warning. Border Station Omega 7 simply stopped transmitting one day, and when the council sent ships to investigate, they found nothing but twisted metal and empty space. Admiral Korthek stood in the war room on Nexus Prime, staring at the tactical display. Red dots showed Devourer fleet movements along the galactic rim. There were more ships than anyone had expected, and they were moving faster than the old record said they could. How many ships are we facing? General Korthek asked. At least, 300, Korthek replied. Maybe more. Our sensors are still not working properly, so we can't get exact numbers. What about our defensive fleets? That's the problem. Our ships are in the wrong positions. Korthzek looked confused. Wrong positions? We have the largest fleet in galactic history. Large, yes, but badly positioned. Korthzek highlighted several areas on the map. Look at this. Our main battle fleets are concentrated around our most important worlds, but the Devourers aren't attacking those worlds. They're hitting our supply lines and communication hubs, so we move our fleets to protect those areas. By the time we move them, the Devourers will be somewhere else. They're using a strategy we don't understand. Korthzek studied the map more carefully. What strategy did we use 50 years ago? Korthzek pulled up an older display. This was our deployment when we fought them before? Much different. Our fleets were spread out in a network pattern with rapid response teams positioned at key jump points. Who designed that strategy? Korthzek was quiet for a moment. Colonel Steve Carter, the human military advisor. Where are Colonel Carter's strategic files? That's another problem. When the humans left, they took all their military analysis with them. We have the basic fleet positions, but we don't understand the thinking behind them. Korthzek felt a chill run down his spine. Are you telling me that our entire defense strategy was built by one human and we don't understand how it works? That's exactly what I'm telling you. 3 sectors away, the Devourer fleet was already proving how effective their strategy was. They had destroyed 5 border stations and captured 2 supply depots without facing any serious resistance. The Council fleets were always one step behind, arriving at empty space where battles had already been fought and lost. Captain Voidstrike, commander of the Devourer Advance Fleet, stood on the bridge of his massive ship and watched his tactical officers plan the next attack. The black-skinned aliens with their glowing red eyes had been preparing for this invasion for 50 years. The Council defenses are much weaker than before, his tactical officer reported. Their fleets are clustered around major worlds, leaving huge gaps in their coverage. Excellent. What about their response times? Much slower. It takes them hours to coordinate fleet movements that used to take minutes. Voidstrike smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. The humans are gone. Yes, sir. Intelligence confirms that all human military advisors left Council space 6 months ago. Perfect. Continue with the plan. Hit their supply lines and communication hubs. Force them to spread their fleets thin. Then we strike at their core worlds when they're vulnerable. Back on Nexus Prime, the Council's emergency session was not going well. Reports of Devourer attacks were coming in every hour, and the Council fleets were failing to stop them. We need to contact Earth immediately, Ambassador Deep Current Flowing said for the 10th time. We need human military expertise. No. Supreme Chancellor Thexkar replied firmly. We will not beg for help from a species we once considered inferior. Then how do you propose we stop the Devourers? We adapt. We learn. We use our own intelligence to defeat them. Vorth Prime Crystal flickered angrily. While we're learning, they're destroying our worlds. 7 border stations are gone. 2 supply depots captured, and our fleets can't even find them. Our fleets are the largest in the galaxy. Size doesn't matter if we can't use them effectively. Chithery Delegate Hivemind 7 buzzed in agreement. My hive worlds are already preparing to withdraw from Council space. We will not sacrifice our people for the sake of pride. No one is withdrawing, Thexkar said. We stand together or we fall together. But privately, Thexkar was beginning to understand the scope of the problem. The reports from his intelligence officers painted a grim picture. Human military advisors hadn't just suggested fleet positions. They had analyzed Devourer psychology, predicted their tactics, and developed countermeasures for attacks that hadn't happened yet. All of that knowledge was gone now, on Earth in a secure facility deep beneath the Swiss Alps. Director Sarah Williams was watching the invasion unfold through hidden monitoring stations that the Council still didn't know existed. How bad is it? Asked General Mike Rodriguez, the head of Earth's military intelligence. Worse than I expected, Sarah replied. The Devourers are using the same tactics they used 50 years ago, but the Council has forgotten how to counter them. Should we intervene? Not yet. We warned them this would happen. We offered to train their officers in human strategic thinking. They refused. Mike looked at the tactical displays showing Devour fleet movements. Those are real people dying. Out there, yes, they are. And if we rush in to save them now, they'll never learn to value what we bring to the partnership. So we just watch. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. We wait for them to ask for help. Really ask, not demand or threaten. When they're ready to treat us as equals instead of servants, then we'll consider helping. On the research world of academia, Dr. Flux Pattern was facing his own crisis. The terraforming project on Kepler 7 had completely collapsed. Without Dr. Amy Rodriguez's expertise, the alien scientists had tried to follow her written instructions, but the complex ecosystem they were trying to create had died within weeks. We need to understand human agricultural science, Dr. Flux Pattern told his research team. But none of us studied their methods carefully enough. Why didn't we? Asked Dr. Crystal Growth 9. Because we thought their methods were primitive. We thought our technology was superior. What do we do now? Dr. Flux Pattern's crystal body dimmed with sadness. We try to contact Dr. Rodriguez. We ask for her help, and we hope she's willing to give it. The communication to Earth took 3 days to reach Dr. Amy Rodriguez at her new laboratory in Colorado. When she saw Dr. Flux Pattern's message, she felt a mixture of sadness and frustration. Please help us, the crystal being's message said. We understand now that we need human knowledge. We were wrong to take your expertise for granted. Amy thought about the years she had spent working with the Vorth scientists. They were brilliant beings, but they had never really listened to her ideas. They had used her research without understanding the principles behind it. She composed her. Reply carefully. I'm willing to help, but not the same way as before. If you want human assistance, it has to be as true partners, not as consultants you ignore when convenient. Meanwhile, the military situation was getting worse. The Devourers had destroyed 15 border stations and were now threatening the outer colonies. Council fleets were scattered across the galaxy, chasing enemy ships they couldn't catch. Admiral Korthek stood in his command center, looking at reports from the latest battle. 3 Council destroyers had been lost, and they hadn't even damaged a single Devourer ship. Sir, his communications officer said, we're receiving a message from Fleet Captain Rex Prime. His battle group engaged the enemy near Zelani Station. What's the result? Total defeat, sir. All ships lost. Captain Rex Prime's final message said the Devourers knew exactly where our ships would be and when they would arrive. Korthek felt a cold certainty settle in his mind. They're reading our tactics. They know how we think. How's that possible? Because 50 years ago, humans taught us how to fight them. Now the humans are gone, but the Devourers remember how humans think. They're using our own strategies against us. For the first time since the invasion began, Korthek realized that the Council might actually lose this war. Not because they lacked ships or weapons, but because they lacked the human ability to think. Several steps ahead, he walked to his private office and stared at the communication console. He knew he should contact Colonel Steve Carter on Earth. The human military advisor would know how to stop the DEVOURERS. But contacting Earth would mean admitting that the Council needed human help. It would mean admitting that humans were not inferior, that they brought something valuable to the galaxy that other species could not replicate. Korthek thought about his pride, then thought about the millions of beings who would die if the Devourers won. He reached for the communication console, then stopped. Not yet. The Council still had time to find their own solution, but deep down, he knew they were running out of time quickly. The evacuation alarms on Nexus Prime had been sounding for 6 hours. Supreme Chancellor Thexkar stood in his office, watching through the window as ships fled the great space station. The Devourer fleet was only 12 hours away, and the Council's last defensive line had crumbled like paper. Sir, we need to leave now, General Korthek said as he entered the office. The last transport ships are preparing to depart. Thexkar didn't move from the window. How many worlds have we lost? 43. Border worlds. 15 major colonies. 8 industrial centers. Korthzek's voice was heavy with defeat. And we've lost contact with the entire Rim defense network. Our casualty numbers? Over 2 million military personnel. Civilian casualties are estimated at 50 million and rising. Vexkar finally turned away from the window. In the past month, his red skin had grown pale and his proud bearing had collapsed into exhaustion. And we still have no idea how to stop them. No, sir. Our fleets are scattered across the galaxy. Our communication systems are failing. Our supply lines are broken. Korthzek paused. Sir, Admiral Korthzek is requesting permission to contact Earth. Denied. Sir, with respect, we're facing complete defeat. The humans might be our only hope. Vexkar's eyes flashed with anger. The Galactic Council does not beg for help from inferior species. What if they're not inferior? The question hung in the air between them. Vexkar stared at his security chief, seeing doubt in the younger Corvin's eyes. What are you saying? Korthzek chose his words carefully. Sir, I've been studying the human records that we still have access to. Their military strategies, their engineering solutions, their diplomatic achievements. What if we were wrong about them? Wrong how? What if humans weren't working for us because they were weak? What if they were working with us because they wanted to help? Vexkar was quiet for a long moment. Even if that were true, it's too late now. They're gone. Are they? Before Vexkar could answer, his communication console chimed with an incoming message. The screen showed the face of Ambassador Deep Current Flowing, calling from her evacuation ship. Chancellor, I'm forwarding you a message that just arrived from Earth. Vexkar accepted the transmission. A moment later, a human face appeared on his screen. The woman was middle-aged, with gray hair and kind but tired eyes. My name is Director Sarah Williams, the human said. I represent Earth's government in matters concerning the Galactic Council. We are aware of your current situation with the Devourer invasion. Vexkar leaned forward. Are you offering to help? We are offering to discuss the possibility of assistance, but only under certain conditions. What conditions? First, any cooperation between Earth and the Council must be based on true partnership, not the servant relationship that existed before. Second, humans who return to Council space must be treated as equals with full decision-making authority in their areas of expertise. Third, the Council must acknowledge that humanity brings valuable knowledge and perspective to the galactic community. Vexkar felt his pride rebel against these terms. You're asking us to admit we were wrong, Sarah Williams nodded. Yes, we are, because you were wrong. Humans were never your servants or your tools. We were partners who were treated like hired help. And if we refuse these terms? Then you face the Devourers alone, just as you wanted. The transmission ended, leaving Vexkar staring at a blank screen. Sir, Korthzek said quietly, the evacuation ships are leaving. We need to make a decision. Vexkar thought about the millions of beings who had already died. He thought about the billions more who would die if the Devourers conquered the galaxy. He thought about his pride and the pride of his people. Then he thought about something else. He remembered a conversation from years ago when Colonel Steve Carter had tried to explain human military philosophy. We don't fight to prove we're strong, the human had said. We fight to protect what matters. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is ask for help. At the time, Vexkar had dismissed it as human weakness. Now he wondered if it was actually human wisdom. Open a channel to Earth, Vexkar said finally. Sir, you heard me. Open a channel to Earth. The connection took several minutes to establish. When Sarah Williams appeared on the screen again, she looked surprised. Director Williams, Vexkar said, I am Supreme Chancellor Vexkar of the Galactic Council. I am requesting human assistance in defending our worlds against the Devourer invasion. I see. And do you accept our conditions? Vexkar closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, something had changed in his expression. Yes, I accept that humans are our equals. I accept that we need your knowledge and expertise. And I accept that we were wrong to treat you as servants instead of partners. Sarah Williams was quiet for a moment. That wasn't easy for you to say. No, it wasn't. Good. Admitting mistakes is the first step toward fixing them. Can you help us? We can try. I'm authorizing Colonel Steve Carter to return to Council space immediately. He'll bring a team of military advisors and strategic analysts. But understand, we're not coming as your saviors. We're coming as your partners. I understand? And one more thing, Chancellor. When this crisis is over, we need to have a serious discussion about how the Council operates. A lot of things need to change. Vex Carr nodded, agreed. 2 days later, Colonel Steve Carter arrived on Nexus Prime aboard a human military transport. The space station was mostly empty now, with only essential personnel remaining to coordinate the evacuation of Council space. Carter was a tall, thin man with gray hair and sharp eyes. He looked older than when he had left, but his bearing was still confident and professional. "Colonel Carter," Admiral Korthek said as they met in the war room, "thank you for coming." "Don't thank me yet," Carter replied. "Show me what we're dealing with." Korthek activated the tactical display. Red dots showed Devourer fleet positions throughout the galaxy. They've captured most of the outer rim. Our fleets are scattered and demoralized. We've lost all strategic coordination. Carter studied the display for several minutes. "I see the problem. You've been fighting them like a traditional enemy, but the Devourers aren't traditional. They're a hive mind. They think differently than individual beings." "How? Do we stop them?" "First, we need to understand their goals. They're not trying to occupy our worlds. They're trying to consume our resources and move on. That means they have weaknesses we can exploit." Carter pulled up a different display. 50 years ago, we defeated them by attacking their supply lines and forcing them to fight on multiple fronts. They're efficient when they can focus on one target, but they struggle with complex, multidimensional warfare. Can we still use that strategy? Modified versions, yes. But we need to act fast. They're already adapting to our current tactics. Over the next week, Carter and his team worked around the clock to reorganize the Council's defenses. They pulled back the scattered fleets and formed them into coordinated strike groups. They identified key Devourer supply routes and planned simultaneous attacks. Most importantly, they restored communication between the various Council species. The first major battle came at the Zolani trading hub near the Galactic core. 3 Devourer fleets converged on the system, expecting to find it lightly defended. Instead, they walked into a carefully planned trap. "All units, this is Admiral Korthek," the Corvan commander said as the battle began. "Execute Plan Delta 7. The Council fleets moved with precision they hadn't shown in months. Strike groups hit the Devourer flanks while the main fleet engaged them head-on. For the first time since the invasion began, the aliens were fighting. As a coordinated force instead of individual species, the battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, 2 Devourer fleets had been destroyed, and the third was retreating toward the galactic rim. "How many ships did we lose?" Carter asked as reports came in. 12 ships damaged, 3 destroyed, Korthek replied. "Minimal casualties," Carter nodded. "Good, that's how you fight a hive mind. You make them react to you instead of the other way around." The Devourer retreat continued for the next month. Faced with coordinated resistance and strategic thinking, they couldn't predict. The alien invaders began withdrawing to the space between galaxies, but the victory came at a price. The Council had lost dozens of worlds and millions of lives. More importantly, they had lost their illusions about their own superiority. 6 months after the crisis ended, Vexcar stood in the rebuilt Council chamber. Representatives from all the major species were present, along with a new addition, Ambassador Jake Morrison, representing humanity as a full partner in the galactic community. "The motion before us today," Vexcar said, "is to formally recognize the human species as senior partners in the Galactic Council with full voting rights and veto power over military decisions." The vote was unanimous. As the session ended, Vexcar approached Jake Morrison. "Ambassador, I owe you an apology." "We treated your people badly," Jake smiled. "We know. But you learned from your mistakes. That's what matters." "Will humanity return to help us rebuild?" "We're already here," Jake said. We never really left. We were just waiting for you to be ready for true partnership.